Welcome to the J3U University podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and deliver the highest level of competitors to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. Building a classic physique. I know a lot of time you're tuning into our podcast and we're talking about just in general broad span about prepping off season for all these different divisions, but we wanted to highlight one that's really taking the mainstream almost now to another level. And the physique that many people want is a classic physique. It's beautiful flow and symmetry. And we thought no one better else than our own J3U coach, Braeden Kardash, to come on and talk to us about this, as he's a national level classic physique competitor. He's made his own transition from men's physique now to classic physique. So he has great insight into what it takes to build towards more of a classic physique and what these division requirements might actually look like. So we wanted to pick Braeden's brain on all these aspects. So Braeden, first off, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. Yeah, really happy to be here and happy to be a part of the team. You know, bringing a full head of hair to the team, valuable asset. So,
and this starts our classic physique conversation. You must have hair.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of really a top classic pro that doesn't have a head of hair, but
we're fixing to change that when I make my transition.
That's it. When you make your transition, John, get out of here, you freaking open pro.
I'll have a wig. Like, that guy has a wig on.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that is a great start to what we want to talk about, Braeden, is we bodybuild. We talk about this all the time, but some people bring up that classic, it's just a smaller version of bodybuilding. I don't think that's true. So I think to start looking at build a classic physique, probably how do you differentiate these classes as far as what might be different in size or conditions, really not a thing, but what are the standouts from classic, from bodybuilding that you see?
Yeah, I mean, we look at just like surface level, obviously, two less poses. You don't have your side tricep. You don't have your most muscular. You have the classic pose. So the
lat spread too.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Your lat.
Yes. Yeah. Back lat spread. Yeah. But I mean, those are the surface level differences that you see right off the bat. Obviously, the trunks are different. However, the trunks have evolved over the years as well, right? And has so the category, right? We look at the first Mr. Olympia for classic, Danny Hester, in 2016, and how quickly the category has evolved, right? But I would definitely say the standouts between classic and bodybuilding is just that, that aesthetic flowing physique, right? Effortless posing that you look at on stage. I think those are the key standouts for me.
It's really brought another standard to all the classes for posing. Like you said, classic posing, then all of a sudden, like you see the artistic style come in, and now it's like filtered into even open bodybuilding. Like people have to put more effort into their posing now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like been a huge positive for all around, because it used to be like no one cared about a routine. You just go out there, hit some like most muscular stuff, and that was it. But now classic really has upped the game for what it takes. And you see guys that, I mean, I just did a reel on, is bodybuilding a sport and are we athletes? And of course, like if you've never competed in bodybuilding, you're like, hell no, it's not a sport and you're not an athlete. But if you have, you realize how hard it is to get on stage and actually pose. And now you see a true display of athleticism from classic physique competitors, and even now bodybuilders as well.
Mm-hmm.
But so development wise, I've heard some guys say like, hey, you don't need your legs like as big as bodybuilding, and maybe there's more emphasis on arms. Do you think that's true, or do you think it's just like, hey, a smaller version of bodybuilding to say, as there's like a weight cap?
I think the category as a whole is very, I want to say subjective in that sense, because, not one physique is alike. You look at the top guys in the sport right now or in that category, right? They all have different physiques. And that's not to say that one, having big quads is going to, you're going to be marked down for that on stage. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to emphasize large quads or, smaller quads is the way to go. I think it all depends on the physique and how the physique flows on stage. You look at Wesley, he just won the back-to-back Arnolds, and he doesn't have massive quads, right? But it works with his physique, right? It flows with his physique. Now, do I think he could bring up his quads? I think, if there was an area that he could improve on, it would probably be in the quad department. So what that means to me is that they're more focused on balance than having like these monstrous quads on stage. So, if I was to put an emphasis in any area, it would just be making sure that there's a balance top to bottom.
It's something I wanted to pull out of this conversation because it's something we spent hours and hours and hours with your process on, Braeden, is like the posing development leading into how you present your own development. Because I do think in classic, you do tend to get away with a little bit less hamstring development relative to bodybuilders, especially within like side shots. But I know this is like with your front double, with your front relax, with your side chest, like these are all things that we've been like, okay, what judging panel are we in front of? What criteria is going to be highlighted? How are we going to hit these poses according to that? So I think there's a lot of context you could potentially provide there that you've worked on within your own process as well, competing at the highest amateur level for classic physique. That's really kind of paid dividends in some of your placings, I believe.
Yeah. So, the packages, for my personal, times on stage, right? Canadian Nationals versus Olympia, amateur versus North Americans, right? 3 completely different packages in terms of fullness, in terms of condition, right? And I think, to be honest, the category does reward a little bit more kind of that full bubbly type of a muscle, right? And if you're really focused on bringing in that hard, dense, dry condition where the muscle looks a little bit shallow and doesn't really have that 3D pop, I do think they lean a little bit more towards having that full look on stage. So if that's what you're kind of referring to, Luke, like that full quads and that front shot, more of a round, bubbly 3D look.
Well, we even saw this like your front relax, right? Like structurally, like how you hit the front relax and being a little bit bigger and fuller across that top line and pulling up more. Like it's a large difference in that. And I think that's where you start to get into like the silhouette and like this flow is so much on when we look at like for example, the X frame that John just built, like the X frame hypertrophy program, like that to me is the epitome of classic physique. And I think it's so much like silhouette into like, rather than just like one standout body part, where I feel like open gets into some standout body parts pretty heavily.
It's been interesting though. I feel like we see some transition even in open where hell, your top 3 guys at the Olympia can hit vacuums and have pretty profound like tapers. And if you went back to like early 2000s of bodybuilding, you had like more mass where you could just like throw a bunch of muscle on and the taper wouldn't matter as much. But now, man, like look at 212, Keon Pearson, look at Derek Lunsford, like your top guys could be great classic physique competitors. I think classic now has taken a lot of the guys we used to see maybe in the 90s even that would have to be an open bodybuilder. And while you have this like really symmetrical, like V tapers were beautiful. Those top 10 Olympia guys were like that back then. Now you see those guys stay classic physique. So you almost have to say like, man, for one, this is a structural aspect you almost can't get around. But with that being said, you have to be substantially like doing some serious abdominal training and waist control on stage to present that because that is heavily being judged now and you just can't get around it. I think classic has probably made that even more stand out. So like you bring to the point, Luke, of developing the X frame, like you actually absolutely have some degree of waist training that has to happen, but anything to further accentuate that V taper and maybe that doesn't have to be as much quad, but as you said, Braeden, as a whole, it has to be the best look and present that type of like classic X frame that you should see. Now, Braeden, you moved up from men's physique, right? So were you just lagging legs? Is that it? Or that was a focal point? Or was it, what made that transition not need to happen, but what did you do development wise and what y'all changed to do that?
It was definitely more legs. Lower body was definitely a focus of mine. Overall size, I've always held pretty well, like symmetry, balance was always there. I mean, my legs were lagging behind, but not drastically. So it was just overall size for me, bringing that a little more density to that muscle. That was pretty much a switch, which I made. Like, I competed my first 2 years naturally in men's physique, and then made that switch over. So that was back in 2017, 2018. So the category was still pretty new. And I remember my first show, we were still wondering, okay, what were the judges really looking for? Are they looking for like that traditional classic look, which isn't generally as hard and dry as a bodybuilder, right? A little bit softer lines. And it was a little bit of back and forth of what they were looking for. And then I think soon after, Danny Hester, 2016, when Braeden won, it was like, okay, that's what we're looking for, which is like, yes, almost condition as much as bodybuilding, if not as much, but bringing that 3D kind of bubbly muscle, right?
You really want all the above, right? Like these guys that are awesome. Like, how do you get full round and as hard as possible? And it's like trying to balance the trade-off, because I know some guys where we can really lean into the condition side, but you just make too much sacrifice on the roundness. Or you have the round guy where if they lose that calling card by chasing condition, it could be, worse for their physique. But for you bringing up legs, and I think a lot of people listening might be in that camp of like, hey, I'm men's physique and, I want to move up. What does that look like for you training wise? Were you doing like legs once a week or not at all because you're a men's physique, or how did that kind of titrate up in your training design?
Yeah, previously it was once a week, men's physique, leg training. And then when I switched, it was an emphasis on hamstring development as well as quads. So separating the 2 days out, that was the big thing. At one point, I think I was hitting lower body 3 times a week. So it was like a lot of frequency to bring up those parts. So it was a focus on glutes and hamstrings as well as quads. And I think that definitely helped. And, some of my clients that I have, if lower body is an emphasis, I think dividing up that frequency amongst the week is obviously a good way to start.
Did you have to scale back on your other upper days? Because a lot of guys are like probably scared to death to train upper any less.
Yeah, no, I didn't, because I was at the beginning, I was one of those guys that was like, I'll be in there 7 days a week. I don't care, like I need to grow. But I mean, obviously I was probably doing more harm than good, but yeah, definitely.
Did you think that was held you back at first? Like, just did you see better growth after you did pull back and do more legs?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. Leg training, I think the sweet spot for me has always been 2 days a week. That's a sweet spot. Obviously taking adequate rest and positioning those days accordingly to the rest of my split. And I do the same thing with my clients as well, right? Like, often you don't want to have a leg day following like a heavy back day, or, vice versa, right? So try and separate those 2 days as best I can. And then obviously implementing the proper rest days. So 2 rest days a week was my sweet spot.
So what's that look like now for your layout? What's your split layout?
Right now, we still have the 2 leg days, obviously a hamstring focus as well as a quad focus. And then right now we have 2 back days, as back is a focus of mine. And we had we had a shoulder and a chest focus day. So that was split as well as 2, but with just recovering from a shoulder injury right now, we've pulled back on the push volume.
Okay. So just make legs and back as big as possible. And
essentially, yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
He's structurally just so big from the front and from the side. It's like, if you just kind of add those dynamics to the physique, it's just pretty going to be so much more taper and just kind of accentuate how much he outmuscles these guys on the stage. Because Braeden, like, when we look back at photos, like, it's typically not a muscularity issue. It's just getting the silhouette up to the standard for your height to stand with the guys in your height class.
Yeah, I think lats from the front is a huge focus of ours. Mm-hmm. And I think that brings up a good point, that, some of the body parts that you can use to accentuate that classic physique, we look at, and we talk about that X frame, John, you look at it from a bodybuilding perspective, you really look at building those like boulder shoulders, right? And then lats that tie into the waist and then flaring quads. I don't know if classic physique is that heavily influenced by having those boulder shoulders. I'd rather see, those hanging lats in the front, because if you look at the posing for classic, we're not hitting the most muscular, right? Which is really, showing that thickness across the shoulders and upper chest and arms, right? Debatably, you have your side chest where some good shoulder development would help. But I think that hanging chest is a more accentuated in the classic physique category. So I think, looking at that, I think if you're to put more emphasis on lat work versus shoulders, I think you'd get more bang for your buck in the classic category.
I could see that too. And then like you have a front and rear double bicep, right? So arms is still going to be a huge emphasis. And I think I agree. Like even in your side chest, big chest, big arms would probably go a lot farther than having like an outstanding, like big delt and not a lot of arm there. And if you look at a lot of these classic guys, like they'll have really big arms, and lats would just complement. You'd have two shots that are super important to make sure you nail those with.
Well, think about the ab and thigh too, right? Because like lat and arm frames that shot so well for an X frame, right? Like you've got these sweeping lats and these massive arms and overhead. It's like your waist is going to look like this.
Yeah, and that's an important shot for classic, in my opinion, because that's the first shot you hit after that back double. So if you have a strong back, you've caught the attention of the judges, and now you're coming into that ab and thigh next, right? So it's an important shot to really, really hold your own, right?
So let's break this down a little farther, because we said, okay, lats and arms, like these is a standout. So what do you see like mistake-wise being made with lat training for classic guys that might be holding them back to get that V-taper and lat development?
I would say not focusing enough on unilateral work, single arm pull downs, single arm lat work is in my opinion, the most effective tool for building those lats, and obviously using that within different angles, a horizontal versus like a more of an upright row or single arm lat pull down. That would be probably the big mistake that I see guys that trying to grow their lats are doing a lot of, wide grip lat pull downs, right? You gotta do those wide grip lat pull downs to get a wider back, right? So that would be like the biggest mistake. I think from an overall programming perspective, I don't see enough specificity. I don't see enough specific training for the client's needs. Like I'll get clients that come to me and they're, a well-rounded classic physique athlete, and I just see a general training split. I don't see any specific, the physique hasn't been looked at objectively to, analyze and look at where the weak points are, comparing to what the standard is, and then designing a program around that. So I think just general training splits and not enough emphasis on unilateral lat work.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3 University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our forums with our J3U team to answer any questions you have, and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3 University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
Yeah, that's well said, because I think a lot of times we are looking for, hey, what's the program that I need that's going to make me the best competitor? And you might go just get someone that copies some pro's routine and think that might be it. But I think when you get a coach, right, you actually look at your stage shots compared to the standard and pull it apart, and then see what they're currently doing. And based around that, you start tinkering with their actual split design that would put emphasis on those needs. And I'm sure from there you can assess the response, and then start adjusting more to where someone's specialized split is going to look very, very different from someone else's. And I would completely agree too, like as far as lat development goes, that's a big one that a lot of guys come to me that don't have backs, and a lot of times it's just down to not making a specialized back split, but just correcting the exercises that already are there and switching them to maybe a little bit more optimal for actually training the lat. Is right. That is a big one.
And I kind of want to just interject and give Braeden some credit here, because I think one of his skills as a coach is how in depth he looks at a needs analysis within a client, and not only from like a program design standpoint initially, but the management portion afterwards of like, we might have these volume metrics that we're looking at across the program design, but then potentially moving some of the volume metrics within sessions to get the most out of it from a performance perspective. I think that's been like a big shift in your thought process towards training over the last 2 to 3 years. And it's just something I've seen from you as a coach that's just like taking leaps and bounds forward. Like we were even having a conversation, I think this was like a day or two ago, about one of your clients, a bit optimizing the volume metrics where they are in the sessions in order to pull more out per set. It's like, it's hard to kind of match the level of post initial plan setup detail that you take with your clients that I think really kind of sets apart how you manage designs over the long haul.
Yeah, I think that stems from just like maturity as a coach, right? And learning from obviously you guys, but John does a good job of this. And if he needs to fit more shoulder volume in, you see him doing laterals on his leg day before his or supersetting laterals with leg extensions. So it's just kind of opening your eyes to positioning volume, where it fits. Not necessarily saying, okay, this is a back day, we have to just do back work on this day, and this is a leg day, so just leg work. Obviously, you don't want to stick like a bent over barbell row on your leg day, right? But if the volume can fit into another day, then why not, right?
With also like we riding back, like we talked about lats, but we bring up the arm piece, right? So how many guys have arm days, and should we have arm days? And of course it's needs based, right? We were just talking about this, but where do you fall? Like what's your advice for guys? Like, hey, I need to bring up my arms. You probably hear that question. And what training split should I be on, Braeden? I need to bring my arms up. Where do I put my arm day? What's your starting thought process of how you tackle that question?
Yeah, you're talking to the wrong guy. I love a good arm pump, right? No, definitely. You have to look at the needs analysis for the client, how that volume fits amongst their split. And, I always start my clients off, even if they're looking to bring up their arms, you start with the volume within a push-pull, like a push-pull split where, you have your bicep work on your pull days and your, tricep work on the push days. Now, if we see that across the week, we have room to increase volume for what they need, then sometimes throwing in bicep work on a hamstring day or a leg day, and if it does come to that where we do need a lot more work within the needs of the client for arms, then it could mean implementing an arm day, right? And you can treat that day as not just an arm day. It could be a day to focus on, some other accessory work as well.
Yeah, it just shows you the flexibility of just laying out volume. And people want to know about splits, but it's kind of the wrong question, really, because our split is just how we organize the volume. And really, you need to know about what your total is for the week. And then we kind of fit in whatever structure we can, like you mentioned earlier, to maximize stimulus across the week, manage fatigue the best we can, and keep performance up throughout all those exercises. So there's a ton of flexibility. So never come to us thinking like we're going to be the push-pull leg guys. Like, no, it's just it's a structure that works well, but we can build off of it from there to like customize it. And to your point too, I think even when I laid out this X-frame training program, it is push-pull legs, because what's the fast track to building an X-frame? Building a big back and legs, keeping your waist tight, maybe a little bit of delt, and arms should come up along the way. But once you get more advanced, that's when you should be getting more specialized. You might see the need then for an arm day, or see a need for now getting just more delt work only and pulling back on other muscle groups. But realize that arm day would be sacrificing another day you could be putting towards building up your major muscle groups that are going to improve that silhouette more than just arms. So it just comes down to when you need it, but earlier on in your career, likely you just need more overall development as a whole. And like Braeden's saying, we could put that arm work strategically within a push-pull sessions to still bring up those body parts along with everything else.
Yeah, and I think also, John, smaller muscle group like your biceps, triceps, they're going to recover faster. They're going to take less session volume, right? So are you getting really your best bang for your buck by positioning all your arm work on one day and just blasting them for, 15 sets? Or is it positioning those and spreading them out throughout the week, right? Are you going to get more bang for your buck? So I think, some guys that have an arm day and they're like, oh, this is my dedicated arm day, they might be missing out on potentially some growth there by spreading it out.
I like that too, because how many different ways can you bend your elbow to train the biceps, right? It's like, well, I got to train it like overhead and back behind me and out to the sides. Like it kind of just all this elbow flexion. So, I mean, once you kind of tax it out within a movement or two, it's like, what else are you doing? You're just getting kind of repetitive. Might as well throw that on to another day and keep the quality really high. Getting to one piece that I have to address, like with training the waist.
Yes.
What does that look like for Braeden and Classic Physique?
That is vacuums, but not just vacuums. Vacuums is definitely a huge part of it. But also, some abdominal control is a huge part. So we can do some direct ab work, to develop the abs. But I think a lot of it stems from abdominal control. I like to implement some planks along with some vacuum work. But we also have to remember, having that tight waist, pulling a vacuum, we need space within our rib cage, within our thoracic, spine as well. So I think mobility, people underestimate mobility within just holding a midsection or pulling a vacuum. Thoracic mobility is a huge thing, especially not only with vacuums, but posing in general, right? So a lot of my clients, I'll see what access they have, based off of their check-in photos, and, assessing that, I'll prescribe, some posing stretches that they do pre and post posing, right? Mostly around thoracic mobility, but also some stomach and abdominal control exercises as well.
So this is like, when you say thoracic, just so they're clear, like this, of course, upper segment of the spine, right? Like rib cage area. Are you talking more like rotational work to get into like quarter turns, or are talking about also extension, flexion type of movements?
It's extension, flexion, and rotation, because we have to remember our rib cage moves, right? Our rib cage expands. It also moves along with it's tied to our thoracic spine, right? So not having the mobility, rib cage mobility is a huge component to all of this. And remember, when you're getting to those front shots, whether it's a front double, whether it's a side chest, we need to be able to expand that rib cage to present, a larger physique on stage. So, that's part of it, along with breathing, right, is a huge part of it as well, right? If you get into that side chest and you're gassed, it's because you don't have that thoracic mobility. It's collapsing your lungs. You're not able to, keep up with your breathing on stage. So it's all of those things combined. I think it's a huge component that's overlooked.
Man, the breathing piece is so huge. Like, you think guys just don't plan for how they're going to breathe on stage, and they white knuckle their poses. And then once you lose that and you start breathing through your abdomen, it stands out so much, and you immediately could like lose your taper on stage because of that. So I think that is an underutilized training piece that needs to happen. And like, I like my own analogy of like, hey, you're playing the basketball game. This is what you're going to be doing, but you never dribble the ball. It's going to be a problem on game day, right? Same with posing. Like if you don't practice your breathing, how you're going to hit all these poses on stage, like you're going to have a bad time on stage. Now, Braeden, there's going to be some like dogma that's just surrounded on things that you should not be doing for your waist. And a lot of people bring up, like, what about squats and deadlifts? Like, I'm going to avoid these movements because they're going to make my waist bigger. Like, is this true? Should we avoid these movements?
No, it's not true. I mean, your waist is not going to blow out from doing, heavy squats or heavy deadlifts, right? Your structure and the way your obliques are designed, that's just your genetic makeup, right? You're not going to create a larger waist. Now, I think there might be a little bit of a misconception with bodybuilders and seeing their waist kind of blow out a little bit from just adding size and the amount of food and volume that they take within the off season. And I don't know if there's, the lines kind of get blurred there between, what are these guys doing? Are they doing heavy deadlifts? Are they doing, heavy squats? Because occasionally you'll see these guys pulling 7 plates or 6 plate deadlift, just for fun. And then people, assume that, okay, that's probably why their waist is blown out. But no, I mean, again, programming in terms of training, we work with what the client's needs are. And if that's a barbell back squat, then it's a barbell back squat. But I think there are better exercises to select. But yeah, they shouldn't be concerned that it's going to blow out their waist.
Well, you brought up the division standard earlier, being Chris Bumstead, and Chris Bumstead has a crazy strong deadlift and squat, and he does these movements. I don't know if he still does, but still, like, these were things that he built his physique up within his needs. And he is the standard for having the type of waist and taper that we're kind of all trying to get to. So if we had to just lean into the anecdotal, there it is. I think we see, like, a lot of guys will just try to size up too quick and their waist doesn't stay streamlined because of that. But guys, if you add 60, 70 pounds of stage weight onto your body, like, you're going to have a bigger waist. It's just, even the classic guys that have moved up, Keon and Derek, like, they actually have a great waist still, but it has gotten bigger along with their overall development too. But for the better, in a sense. But their waist, if you took a tape measure out, it's going to be bigger. It has to go up to support the rest of the structure. So,
yep.
Other things, Braeden, that any mistakes that you're seeing out there that you want to bring up? We didn't touch, like, legs or training or anything else that's standout training wise that you see that you want to touch on.
Yeah, I think a lot of the mistakes that I see, and just, points that I'd like to kind of get across, is the level of posing within classic now. And you mentioned it at the beginning, John. It's leagues above where it was, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even 1 year ago, right? So I think the standard has been raised, and I think what that looks like for two different types of individuals: someone that's more genetically gifted, they can get into some of these poses and every pose looks good, right? Someone who's not as genetically gifted, they may have to tweak and play around with their posing, and that means practice your posing more, but it also means practice different types of poses, within the confines of the category, so that you find the poses that look good on your particular physique, right? And I think that is something that, the guys that are coming up can do a much better job at, combined with, as I mentioned, some of the mobility work. Like, we have a great J3U coach, Daniel Kofin, for posing. But if I send my clients if I send my clients to Daniel and they can't get into some of the poses that Daniel wants them to, I mean, they're not getting the use out of it. So I think combining the posing with mobility is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. And with the posing too, you don't hit what you can't display well, right? I think a lot of people see the routines that's a classic routine. I'm going to go through all these movements, and they want to hit all these different poses starting out earlier on, and they just end up doing a lot of them just not optimal. It would be better to just really nail a few and just do those, hold them longer, and just make some good transitions, versus expose yourself so much doing multiple poses and having ones where you just can't get into them correctly. It's okay. Just pick your best ones, and then add in more as you get more advanced along the way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think your stage presence, I mean, it's big in bodybuilding as well as in classic. It's just your stage presence, right? And I think in classic, you almost have to have, I shouldn't say you have to have, but having that kind of swagger, confidence on stage definitely helps. And if you're getting into your pose and you're shaken and you're nervous and you're not, you don't look comfortable, it's not going to look smooth. It's not going to flow, and you're missing like a huge part of what makes that classic category, right?
I feel like the classic guys all just smile more and have more charismatic than what you see in a lot of the bodybuilders.
Yeah, and we have good hair,
And you have good hair.
He's not going to let the hair thing go.
Yeah, but it all adds to it. Like there's people judging it, right? Like your eyes can be drawn to something that is more pleasing, more attractive, and even the smiling thing sounds stupid, but it makes you more likable, versus that guy that's like mean mugging, making crazy faces on stage, or just looks like a jerk. It's like, you don't want the jerk to win. You want the guy that's smiling, that you connect with, that, seems like just the likable guy. So now I'm sure the judges, it's the best physique on the day. Absolutely. But, having the full package represent what a classic pro should be. I think from the moment 1 foot step on stage to off, you need to nail every single one of that from head to toe in the presentation. And a lot of that starts with like connecting with a coach like you, Braeden, where you can break someone down, their stage presence, their posing, and see what they need to do development wise, not just training, but everything else that would entail them to walk on stage being at their best. So I just end this with, for one, thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm. And if anyone is interested in coaching with Braeden, go to J3UCoaching.com, fill out application, and we can get you connected with Braeden and improve your classic physique or any physique, because Braeden, you coach all the divisions, correct?
Yeah. Not more so bodybuilding, classic, and men's physique, but those are like my main three.
You're not trying to branch into a bikini niche.
I'm letting Bo have that one.
Fair enough.
Braeden, I think you look great in heels. We should try this one day. Oh man, that was so good.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.